This is Popular Front, a podcast focused on the niche details of modern warfare and underreported conflict with me, Jake Hanrahan. Today we're speaking to Joe Kassabian. He's a writer and genocide researcher. He's also Armenian, where he is currently based. We're going to be talking about the end of the ceasefire in Karabakh or Artsakh. This morning, Azerbaijan started bombing Stepanakert, the capital of the so-called breakaway region of Armenia, Artsakh or Karabakh. For almost a year now, Azerbaijan has blockaded the region, starving people to the point where now they're rationed to a few bits of bread. Now, whilst it's completely blocked, they've started to bomb the place. Already 2 children have died. Civilian infrastructure is being torn to bits. So this morning, it seems Azerbaijan has called off the ceasefire in Karabakh or Artsakh. By calling off, I mean they've started literally shelling Stepanakert. Tell us what's going on. What's the developments?
Well, right now everything is very fluid. Like everybody else, I'm kind of just trying to figure out what's going on through what the government is telling us, which isn't a lot at the moment. But it's according to the government of Karabakh, the Azeris are pushing across the entire line of contact, and directly shelling Stepanakert. As of like when we just started recording, the air raid sirens are back on, with both missiles, drones, artillery. I've heard airstrikes as well. They're already publishing, their sizzle reels of fucking drone strike footage on. They say military targets. Some of them are very obviously civilian communication targets as well. They've hit apartment buildings. There's been villages that have their schools struck already. And at the time of recording, as far as I know, the Ministry of Health in Artsakh has said at least 80 civilians are wounded and 5 are dead. We have no idea about military casualties, and likely we won't for some time, but we can assume that's actually significantly higher than that. Small arms fire and military advances over land as well. It's not good, I guess, is how I can end that. It's grim. It's unlike 2020 during the second war. There's absolutely zero connection between Armenia and Karabakh at the moment because the Lashin corridor has been shut down since December of last year. And as of about, I believe, an hour ago, our Prime Minister, Nikol Pashinyan, said that the Republic of Armenia will not be getting involved in the war at all. So that's where we sit as of right now. But as we're recording, I have a feeling things will continue to change.
That is... For our listeners, we're going to have to explain that because that, even to me, knowing so much about the region is fucking crazy. That Pashinyan, the president of Armenia, has just said that they're not going to get involved at all in what is now a war on Karabakh or Artsakh, seen as the quote-unquote breakaway region. This is Armenian people getting killed by Azerbaijan, and the president of Armenia said we're not going to get involved. Why?
I probably have a similar opinion of a lot of Armenians where I say I am not a huge fan of our prime minister. I will just leave it at that in case martial law or something is declared by the time the show comes out. But we're in a no-win situation militarily since 2020. There's the Republic of Armenia has only been connected to Karabakh by a very small corridor, which has been shut down. So any kind of relief to Karabakh would require a massive counteroffensive to retake much of the territory that was lost in 2020 just to be able to relieve Stepanakert. And that is, of course, forgetting that Azerbaijani troops are already in the Republic of Armenia after the last time we did an episode back in September of last year. So in any situation where the Republic of Armenia's military staged some kind of massive counterattack, which I don't think we're capable of doing, Azerbaijan would certainly invade the south, which they've openly stated for well over 3 years now that that is their goal, for that corridor to connect to their enclave in Nakhchivan. Not to mention the entire border with Turkey, which is, by a treaty forced at gunpoint, guarded by Russians, which would clearly not do anything. So, despite all of the prime minister's flaws, of which I literally cannot count all of them, there's really nothing Armenia can do, which really sucks to say. There's no military solution that the Republic of Armenia has in this situation, and Azerbaijan knows that. They want the Republic of Armenia to get involved in this war. It would give them the reason that they need to invade again. Not to mention, they would be able to spin it in a public affairs way, in a propaganda way, that Armenia is invading Azerbaijan, since the international community recognizes Karabakh as a part of Azerbaijan, not Armenia, or an independent country. So it's a lose-lose situation from a geopolitical government standpoint, as well as a military standpoint. We don't have the necessary tools, both diplomatically, geopolitically, or militarily, to relieve Karabakh at all.
Yeah, I understand that, and maybe I'm being naive or kind of old-fashioned, but it just seems absurd to me that the Prime Minister, on the day of the shelling, will go, yeah, no, we're not going to help. It just seems like, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, there's not much they can do, but it just seems crazy to me that would be his first course of action. But there we go.
Yeah, it's not great. It's a shitty situation, and I would really like, I'll say, better leadership in a situation like this, like we all would. But it's one of those situations where, backs against the wall. Our as a nation, our back is against the wall in this situation. Obviously, like, we wish we could do, launch a glorious counteroffensive and relieve the siege of Stepanakert, but like, if we could have done that, we probably would have won the war in 2020.
Yeah, no, I understand. So the blockade has been going on almost a year now. The people of Stepanakert are literally down to bread rations. Some people don't even have the bread. Azerbaijan is now bombing the city. I believe a child has already died.
At least 2, the last time I saw.
At least 2 children are now dead. What are they trying to do here? Are they going to let people out? It doesn't look like it. They haven't let them out for God knows how many months. What does this look like to you? Is this just they just want to kill all the Armenians? I can't think of any other. What else are they doing?
So, to go off of their original statement when they began this offensive today, they said that they would leave open a, quote, humanitarian corridor through the Lashin corridor, the one that has been blockaded between Armenia and Karabakh this whole time. Now, do you trust them to actually keep a humanitarian corridor open? Nobody does, because it's a public-facing statement. It's for the outside. We see what they do during war for their audience, right? They videotape their war crimes, and they publicize them and show them in town squares in Baku. Secondly, it's pretty obvious what their goal is, right? Like, it's been blockaded since December of last year. People are starving. People have starved to death. And only now, when they open a military offensive, are they going to open the corridor. So the obvious answer to this is they want to cleanse the area of the Armenian population through military means. So the people that stay can be considered terrorists or whatever, because they're framing this as a quote-unquote counter-terror operation. But by opening the corridor, they're giving, hypothetically, because nobody's used this corridor from anybody can see, is it open? Is it not being targeted? Are they actually letting people through it because they haven't let anybody through it in so long? No. So this could be a giant trap, or they could be actually opening a corridor so the civilian population could leave. But at the same time, we've also seen in the the lead up to this operation, when they did let people through under the flag of the International Red Cross, any man that served in the military, which Karabakh, like Armenia, has conscription. That's literally every man, barring some kind of medical condition, serves in the military as being terrorists or fighting in terror operations or being separatists, whatever. So you can assume through the previous actions that any man that passes through that corridor is going to be arrested at best. And we see what happens to them. There's been criminal cases in Azerbaijan for people they've accused of terror, which is, a nation that's considered so unfree by global indexes. It's only like 2 points ahead of the Taliban controlled Afghan government at this point. So you can assume what fate waits for them if they are arrested. So it's not really a corridor by any stretch of the imagination. And when you look at the other messaging that they're having in this, what their goal is for the end of, quote unquote, the end of this counterterror operation is a complete and unconditional surrender of the Karabakh government. They've dismissed the European Union calls for peace. Their mission is to complete what they wanted to complete in 2020, which is the destruction of the government of Karabakh, as well as the people there as a political body, an ethnic body, as in an entity at all. I cannot see any other outcome of this war, barring some kind of unprecedented international intervention.
I mean, that's ethnic cleansing, essentially.
It's genocide. It's virtually the same thing that occurred in Srebrenica. It's the same thing that occurred during the Kosovo Wars. It's the same thing that happened to the Bosniaks. It's just happening at a time. I mean, a lot of people have pointed out, like, oh, people are doing this because the whole world is focused on Ukraine. But let's not fucking kid ourselves here. They wouldn't lift a finger if the Ukrainian war wasn't happening anyway.
Right, exactly. What has Azerbaijan given as their excuse to do this right now? I saw they're saying one of their trucks ran over a mine in Martuni, which Martuni is half controlled by Azerbaijan and has been since 2020. So yeah, I mean, it seems a very odd situation, even for their standards, to say that's why. Maybe that's not the full picture. What are they saying?
They're using the mine explosion, which very well could have happened. This whole area has been the scene of now 4 wars since the 90s. There's a lot of landmines planted by both elements of the Armenian and Karabakh side and the Azerbaijani side, because that's how war goes, unfortunately. And many of these mines have been laid so long ago, nobody has any idea where they are. So they're using this mine explosion, as well as others like it, constant ceasefire violations, which they blame on quote unquote terrorist aspects of the Armenian army, because they consider what they call the Artsakh Defense Army, which is the local self-defense unit, as being the actual Armenian military. And they consider these quote terrorists. So they're doing they're framing this whole thing as they said that they're going to restore constitutional order, as well as destroy terror elements within Karabakh. And there has not been any Armenian military forces in Karabakh for quite some time, due to a peace treaty that Armenia signed a while ago. And the elements that they're fighting is the local self-defense force. There is no Armenian military there.
Right, and give us an idea of the scale right now. I mean, Azerbaijan versus the Artsakh Defense Army. It's unfortunately no contest, right?
I mean, to make a long story short, yeah. The Artsakh Defense Army was pretty badly savaged during the 2020 war, and because immediately following that, the Russian peacekeepers then gained control of the Lachin corridor per the ceasefire agreements. And since then, from my understanding, they have not been reinforced, resupplied, or anything. Um, and from what it sounds like, and from the messaging, and from the Azeri side of being, their goal is the complete capitulation of the Karabakh government. This is their final push to take Stepanakert, which is the capital of Karabakh. And the Karabakh side has reported contacts again across the entire front line. So this is not a small scope operation. This is the Azeris mean to finish what they wanted to finish in 2020, and not to mention since the blockade in December, despite the fact that military goods weren't being transported into Karabakh anyway, which is another messaging they use to kind of explain the blockades. It was a smuggling route, and these soldiers um, are suffering like anyone else in Karabakh, which is, you can only imagine how badly supplied they are because of the blockade. Um, they're, I'm sure they're uh, being a frontline soldier already sucks, and now they've been starved since December, and you can assume that their supply lines are non-existent. It's a very grim situation, and I mean, nobody expects anything from the Russian side here, but the messaging is like Armenia brought this upon itself for turning to the West and sending supplies to Ukraine very recently, like not even 3 weeks ago, I don't think.
In regards to what you just said about the soldiers, the Artsakh soldiers, I mean, when I was there, kind of the start of the ceasefire, before any blockades, the government, frankly, had done very little for them. They were in trenches that were just simply, by anybody's eye, not deep enough. Their shoes were just not adequate for winter. They didn't have enough ammunition. Their helmets were useless, no body armor, even winter coats had to be provided by a local charity. There was nothing being done for them then, and as you said, with the blockade, even less. That said, there is fighting going on right now. It's not like they've just laid down their arms. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, of course there's fighting. The Artsakh Defense Army, I think everybody in the government there, despite the fact, I mean, if everybody's going to be practical about these things, they know that this is a holding pattern. The best that they can do is hold them off and hope that international pressure stops them, because they know the end result of capitulation is genocide. But like you said, I mean, you only can expect so much, and I'm sure they're going to make them pay dearly for whatever advances that they do make. And I can't see a situation where this ends with Armenians still existing in these lands without international intervention, because the Artsakh Defense Army is, by definition, a local defense army, and it was horribly brutalized during the 2020 war, and you can't expect it to have recovered back then since then under these kind of circumstances. Even the Armenian military hasn't, despite being a nation state with open supply lines to weapons manufacturers and an entire economy to help rebuild it. So these soldiers are almost certainly fighting with personal weapons, body armor if they're lucky, probably no food, very little water, against and I don't want to make Azerbaijan sound like some kind of superpower or world power. They're not, but they do have some very powerful friends who love to give them gifts. Yeah, I mean, even on Rosh Hashanah, like 2 days ago, Israel was transporting weapons to Azerbaijan. Russia, as in 2020, certainly gave them the green light to go ahead and do this, because this is literally happening around the heads of Russian peacekeepers, just like it did in September last year. It is geopolitically advantageous for a lot of people to let Azerbaijan do what they want. And, the EU condemns this, or so and so condemned that, but they're not going to do anything. The best bet is what stopped the fighting in September was heavy pressure from the United States, September of last year, in the Republic of Armenia. And ever since the blockade, international pressure has grown on Azerbaijan a lot, and very recently, actually. So we can assume countries like France, who's been pretty historically close to Armenia, and the United States, who are kind of fostering Armenia's slow westward turn here. Like, there's American soldiers in the country as we speak for a joint training mission. You can assume that they will pressure Azerbaijan to stop. However, functionally, what do those words mean without an or at the end of them, right? So we don't know. The best we can hope for, like I said, is some kind of intervention. Baku itself has said that this is going, quote unquote, until the end. So, and we know what the end is.
Yeah. And already Azerbaijan is, gleefully streaming rocket airstrikes on Stepanakert. I mean, from the footage, I don't even know what they're hitting, what they're celebrating. It's clearly just civilian architecture, most of it. As you said, 2 children have died. France has said, basically, stop it, blah, blah. But this specter of the international community, what can they really do? I mean, they're saying, hey, stop. No one's going to do anything. No one's going to, by force, stop them. Negotiations, I don't think, are going to stop them. Why would it? I mean, Azerbaijan is in a very good place right now. They supply all this new gas to Europe. They're kind of in this double place. The same with Turkey, where they're friendly with Russia. They do business with Russia. They buy weapons from Russia. But then with the other side of the cheek, say to the West, oh, no, we don't like them. We'll provide for you instead. It just seems they're actually in a lot stronger position than we think.
Yeah, they're in effectively a politically bulletproof position. The European Union needs them, and despite the fact that their sanctions are bullshit because Azerbaijan is routing Russian gas through their pipes and selling it to the EU, but so there's 2 things. So what could the international, quote unquote, international community, by international community, I mean the United States. Nobody thinks the European Union is going to do anything. Militarily, the only country in the European Union that could do anything is France. And, with all, that's not going to happen. Now, the United States could end this conflict in 5 seconds if they really wanted to. Now, what's actually going to happen? Nothing. I don't know what kind of pressure they could actually put on Baku at this point to get them to stop. Because in 2020, when they failed to recapture Stepanakert and ended literally with an eye shot of it at Shushi, they could spin that narrative domestically as a victory because they took over the lands that they had largely lost in the first Karabakh war. But now their public messaging is, this ends when the Karabakhsi government surrenders. We are going until the end. We're going to restore constitutional order. So you can see that their public messaging is much different this time around. So that means they have very defined aims. Now, what could stop them from completing that? Nothing outside of an aircraft carrier pulling up and bombing them. Because sanctions, it's just not going to happen. There's no functional sanctions the United States could place upon them on their own that would hurt them. They could cut military funding to Azerbaijan, which they've been giving since the global war on terror, because despite the fact a lot of news outlets, the shittier ones out there, like to frame this as a Muslim country attacking a Christian one. This conflict has nothing to do with religion. But when the global war on terror started, obviously the United States was very active on finding countries they saw as Muslims that could be their allies and rooting out quote unquote terrorism. So they reached out to Azerbaijan, which is largely secular anyway, and they've been training with them ever since. So they could cut that, but it's really not that much that the U.S. gives them. It's not like this massive amount of money. They're not completely funding the Ministry of Defense or anything insane like that. They pretty much only train counter terror forces and stuff like that, which is very easily replaced when you realize how much money that Azerbaijan is making through their EU oil deals and all of the things they get functionally for free from Turkey. So there's really no mechanism that the United States has to end this that I could see reasonably.
Has Turkey said anything officially about this yet?
I haven't seen anything, but they made previous statements that, like, were what you would expect of, we support Azerbaijan's right to territorial integrity, which is, their word for doing whatever they want to Karabakh. And, in 2020, Turkey gave them quite a bit of assistance in logistics and command and control, as well as flying actual bombing missions against the Karabakh forces. They might be doing that again. We honestly have no idea. But at the same time, Azerbaijan really doesn't need that this time around.
What's the mood like? You're in Armenia, right? What's the mood like there?
I wasn't here during in 2020 when the war started, but I heard stories about how people reacted, where everybody is just glued to their phone, and that's kind of the mood that I get. But at the same time, Armenia's been through this so many times that after a while, you just learn to live with it. That's kind of how I understand it. It's obviously there's massive protests going on outside of the Chancellery building and outside the Parliament. There's rumors that someone like a large group of protesters tried to break into the Chancellery. There's the Prime Minister said that there's a possible coup going on, which, to be fair, there might be. Not from here, but from Russia. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, and he also still has a role in the Russian Security Council, openly said that Pashinyan needed to be overthrown and killed. So we can assume that there is something there. So obviously the mood changes very differently. A lot of the people, like, again, he's not a popular guy, so I'm not like defending him, but there is a lot of conspiracy theories that still survive from the second war in 2020, where he's a traitor, he's a Turkish agent, things of that nature, and those will flare up again. But at the same time, I don't want to take away anybody's anger who does want him to resign or step down, because he did say that they're not going to get involved. And despite the fact we're all mostly realistic about our military options, which is zero, it's not what they want to hear. So they're rightfully pissed,
What about military volunteers? I know at the around 2020, that kind of stepped up a little bit. There was a lot more of it than there was previously. Not saying like, military volunteers are going to be able to save everything, but do you know anything about that? I imagine if there's a time to go, it's now.
Well, that is one of the main differences when it comes to 2023 and 2020. There's no way to get there now.
Yes.
Which, of course, they have Karabakh in a blockade with Russian assistance, and there's no, like, that's why I said the only way that Armenia could support or relieve or help Karabakh in any way is launching a massive counteroffensive to retake those areas, and we just can't. So there's no way that anybody can actually get there to lend their assistance if they wanted to, which is a situation that Azerbaijan very clearly wanted to engineer, because it benefits them. They've effectively had this area that's been a national shame to them, in a siege for since December, weakening every facet of everything that makes this small state work, because it did work. I mean, it ranks very highly in freedom indexes. They have free elections. They have ministries. They have universities, things of that. Like, this is not a small nothing. Like, they had a functioning government there, a functioning states, and they still do. I mean, it's under siege. It's who knows how much longer it will survive, but they wanted to strangle it. And when they realized that wasn't necessarily working, this is what. But I also believe that this was always going to be their end goal when they started the blockade. Like, there's no other reason for it other than to put it under siege. And the end state of any siege is the capitulation of the besieged force through diplomacy or through military methods. But there's no route of any assistance from Armenia to Karabakh at this moment.
Jesus Christ. All right. I mean, I don't really know what else to say, but you know, if people want to help, what is there any idea that you can think of?
Again, that's the main difference. 3 years later, is
you can't get anything up there, right? It's in the sickest way possible, like a masterstroke by Azerbaijan. It's not new, but it's like, yeah, we'll blockade the whole place and then, you know, start killing people. No one can get in, no one can get out. It's very dark, but it's like if you're the sort of person that wants to literally exterminate a race, that's what you do.
They've turned Karabakh effectively into an open air concentration camp since December, and now they're going to try to liquidate it.
And for anyone that's like, oh, these people are being over the top or biased, their politicians over there have literally said as much. I think it was 2 weeks ago, one of the head politicians of Azerbaijan said, like, there's probably going to be a genocide there, and it's the Armenians' fault. So it's this is not hyperbole.
Yeah, they've literally blamed the quote unquote separatists for any genocide that might occur. Like, this isn't a car accident. This is something they've planned for years and years and years. There's no way around it. I mean, and you know, this will often be framed as like, you know, just like it was before in September of last year, where, you know, this is what you get for being an ally of Russia. Which is just fucking patently ridiculous. It's very obviously, over the last several months, Armenia has not been a Russian ally. Not to mention, the Karabakh is unrecognized. And after the war in 2020, they had Russian peacekeepers stationed there because nobody else would fucking do it. And I'm not saying that Russians did anything during their peacekeeping phase, because they literally did not. But when your option is being wiped the fuck out, and you know the superpower that created this whole mess in the first place saying that they can stop it, despite the fact everybody knowing the situation is geopolitically advantageous for Russia, what other options do you have?
Yeah, it's very true, but it's very it's one of the rare cases where it's genuinely, it's like, yeah, nothing can be done and no one cares. And I mean, I don't know what other to conclude other than the quote unquote international community simply doesn't care about these people because they're Armenian. Like, well, not because they're Armenian, but it's like where they are, it's not important enough. Tough shit, basically, they're gonna die. I don't know, it just like seems so clean cut like that. I don't know how else to think about it.
That's pretty much what it is. I mean, if Karabakh was geopolitically advantageous to get involved in, they would. I mean, it's geopolitics. It's not personality. It's not good or bad or moral or immoral. And if you're going to be practical about it, and that's, you know, the reason why, you know, all these countries got involved in Kosovo wasn't because of a genocide. It's because it's geopolitically advantageous. How many genocides has NATO or the EU or the UN sat around and allowed to happen because it happened in some place that it didn't fucking matter to them? There's no oil, there's no rich minerals or whatever that's going to make this worthwhile. We're not the Karabakh is not an enemy of a geopolitical enemy of any superpower in the world. It's not morals. There's no such thing as morals on a geopolitical stage. There's no such thing as European ethics. it's fucking vaporware. It's
Of
propaganda.
course, and I wish just people be honest about that. People are like, oh, why do you say that? I'm like, well, that's the truth. I mean, it's not. I'm not saying, oh, well, then they're evil, then they're this. That's just how it is. Like, people are not doing this out of the basis of ethics. It never is that. Exactly. And I think this situation really proves it. You know.
And it'll be, people will rationalize it in the ways that they rationalize any kind of brutality that they A, do not understand, and B, want to make it into a very easily consumable piece of something that can make them feel good about themselves. So, this separatist pro-Russian area is being bombed. Like, good. It's about it's just like Crimea, shit like that, which I've already seen. When it's absolutely fucking baffling to me, because I mean, far be it from us to say this is the first time a group of idiots attempted to understand a situation that they just do not know about, but it is kind of stark in seeing it happen literally within minutes of a war starting.
Yeah. The only solace is that, like, those people, like, in real life, firstly, you'll never meet them, and secondly, they don't matter. You know what I'm saying? I know, unfortunately, this horrible internet rhetoric, but they don't exist. Thank God not everybody thinks like that, and thank God they actually don't have the outsized influence that it seems they do. But I mean, as an Armenian, I can't even, well, as a human being, I can't imagine how awful that is to see. But hopefully, people can look past all that bullshit and actually kind of, I think the bare minimum anyone can do right now is just spread the information, right? This is happening. Kids are dying. Civilians are dying. There's no hope. There's no exit. It's grim, and I hate to be so pessimistic, but I think the very least we can do is put out the very harsh but real realities of the situation.
I agree. I mean, it's grim and it's bleak, but at the same time, looking away from it doesn't solve anything. And if it's one thing that I've learned through, my career in academia as a genocide researcher or hosting my show, is that you need to look this shit in the eye and you need to see what's going on, because the second you start putting it through weird filters that rationalize mass killing, whatever it be through dog memes on Twitter, or using war as some kind of team sport, like they're watching football at home, like that's not a normal way to consume these things. And not to mention, it's very important to document these things. I mean, I'm not saying that people on their fucking personal social medias, that doesn't matter. But what is important is that we document this for history, because it's going to happen whether we look at it or not. And the most thing you can do is make people look at it directly in its face as it happens. And it's disgusting. It's grim. I don't like fucking seeing it, but it's what we have to do. It's all we can do.
Yeah. All right, Joe. Thank you very much and good luck. I hope things work out for what you're doing, where you're going, whatever. If people want to get hold of you and stay up to date, because I think, you're one of the best people to do this from both sides, through both lenses. Very rational, but not a psychopath, not a robot. What's the best way? Where can people find you?
So you can find me on Twitter on my new account at Joe Kassabian. I also host a podcast called the Lines Led by Donkeys podcast, where we talk about military history, a whole bunch of other stuff. And I have a side series on our Patreon called History of Armenia, where I talk about Armenian history related things, and now a lot of current day stuff, because history continues to happen. But that's about it.
All right, mate. Thank you very much. And if you need anything, just let us know. That was the Popular Front podcast. If you want more exclusive bonus episodes, extra video content, access to the Popular Front network, and more, subscribe to patreon.com/popularfront. We're entirely independent and grassroots. Nobody owns us. Patreon keeps us going, as does our merchandise. You can get Popular Front apparel and accessories at www.popularfront.shop. You can also buy our various publications there, like the Popular Front magazine, which is available now. We're censored on social media and streaming platforms, so please do follow us and share our content. Watch our documentaries at youtube.com/popularfront. Follow us on Instagram at popular.front, Twitter at popularfront_. And for uncensored updates on the world at war, follow our Telegram at popularxfront. If you want to keep track of my work, it's the same on all socials at Jake_Hanrahan, HANRAHAN. For all those links, go to www.popularfront.co. The music in this episode was produced by Sam Black. Check him out at samblackpf.com or search Sam Black PF on Spotify. Intro music is by Home. Thank you to this episode's sponsors. This episode was sponsored by Propagandopolis, an outlet selling and writing about historical conflict propaganda from around the world. You can buy prints at propagandopolis.com. Use the promo code POPULARFRONT10 for 10% off. This episode was also sponsored by Oracle Coffee Shop in Portland, Oregon, USA. They're an independent coffee business selling only fair trade products. See them at 3875 Southwest, Bond Avenue 97239. Let them know that Popular Front sent you and you will get a discount of some kind on your coffee there. Thank you to the high tier Patreons: Evan Kale, Peter Cherry, Lupe Calderon Garnica, Cyril Geist, Thomas Giuseppe, Jake Fuentes, Viola Forvel, Christian Bustamante, Daniel Verdin, Margosha, Rohan Irvin, Ryan Barbadillo, VS, Brian R, Justin Katuna, Evan Pank, Bradley Hope, Wizard Actual, Benjamin Tupper, Chongus Bongwater, Siddhartha O, Damien, Cameron Collins, Matthew Diffley, Claire, Liana, Robert, Sean, Christianovich, NTHG, Atiro Rafael Macias, Ethan Schwick, Peter Nybratton, Gabriel K, AG Barcelona, David McManus, Tom Petrie, James Leons, Bradley Davies, No Dogs No Hamsters, Brendan Crave, B, Dallas Dunn, LD50 Seattle, Adam H, B Rambo, Larson, Ivan Julien, Björn Kirsten, Diamondstein, Michael O'Connor, Nicholas Butter, JD, James Karpinski, Jav, James Cully, Ethan, Fitzmadrid, Ed Coulthard, D San, Mike Barone, Scott Hopton, Liam Williams, DZA, Jojo Arani, Vegan Straight Edge Global Cabal, Amy R, Rubicon, Frank Austin, Amelia, me, Michael, Neck, Freya Northman, Neba, Noah, Andrew Hurley, Vida Provost, Bike Lane Bowser, Brian McLaughlin, Tom Lochran, Young Wasabi, Tony Bin, JL, Stephen Davila, Chad Walker, What Bitcoin Did with Peter McCormick, Christopher Martin, Ryan Sandercock, and Moritz Zumwalt.